Members, the question is that the motion be agreed to. Carmel Sepuloni.
Mr Speaker, I need to say from the outset that fundamentally on this side of the House we do support and have supported a rewrite of the social security legislation, as we support the idea that there needs to be some clarity, some consistency, that the Act since 1964 has had continual amendments made to it, and so it is very difficult to navigate and it is disjointed, and the Law Commission and others have all stated that that is the case. We support the Social Security Act being more accessible and cohesive. We think that is very important, Mr Speaker, but what we are concerned about is that the policy neutral rewrite that we were promised by the National Government is at risk here when we look at what we've finally been presented with, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, the Minister herself has said that yes, they've gone through, tried to modernise it, tried to look for places where they can make it more cohesive, more consistent, but she's also said that this has been used as an opportunity to actually insert some policy changes, and I think that is where we have concerns, Mr Speaker, and I think they're very valid concerns. This is not a straightforward rewrite. There are changes that have been made to policy, and some of those changes, we believe, Mr Speaker, should be put through a different avenue, not in a rewrite of social security legislation, Mr Speaker. There are two different things going on here, and they should be kept very separate. Mr Speaker, I've had conversations with a number of social agencies who are very keen to make submissions on this bill. Those agencies that I've spoken to have either said, we are concerned, but we are supportive of this going to select committee and then it being nutted out there, or they have said they will not be taking a position on whether or not this should be supported to select committee in the first instance. So I think that already highlights that there are concerns out there by the experts, by the people who are operating from this legislation on a daily basis, Mr Speaker, and we take on board their advice. So I can say from the outset as I get into this, we will support this to select committee, but we want there to be a robust analysis of what we have in front of us, and we do have concerns which I'll talk about shortly, Mr Speaker. Given that those social services do want it to have that robust attention paid to it, they want to have the time needed to pull together a robust submissions on the bill, Mr Speaker. I'm a little bit disappointed to hear that the Minister is asking that this bill be reported back 2 months earlier than actually required. So she's saying to us that she wants it reported back the 15th of September. If this is going to be done properly, which we should all be committed to making sure it is done properly, then why would she reduce the time period for which we can give this the attention that it deserves? And that was one of the concerns that was raised by one of the organisations I spoke to this morning, was that all they wanted was that this be given the time that it deserves. So I'm disappointed already to hear that the Minister is saying 4 months rather than 6 months before it's reported back to the House. And I have to say that actually that probably is indicative of an underlying agenda that we should all be a little bit concerned about here, and that the social sector should be concerned about. This is not an honest and upfront rewrite that is policy neutral like we had been told by the National Government that it would be. And I'm going to talk about some of the examples where we do have a few concerns. So we know now with the rewrite that the Minister has written into the principles the investment approach, and so our concern, and many other providers outside of the Parliament have concerns, that actually there's a lot of critique that needs to be put into the National Government's social investment approach. And just reading some academic articles on this recently, I've got even more cause for concern. So the social investment approach that that government has presented us with is all about forward liability, the cost to the state. But there's no cost-benefit analysis going on in terms of if we make this investment into these people and we provide them with this level of support and resource, what will be the benefits down the track and how much money will that actually save for us as a country? It is all short short-term gains, all about how much money they're paying out in any financial year to benefits, all about their issues with long-term welfare dependency, but nothing about real investment. And real social investment, as far as we're concerned, on this side of the House, is about investment in people and making sure that if they actually do have to have an interaction with the social welfare system, that we support them so that an investment is made so that when they leave the benefit, they are better placed to go into secure work, they are better placed to increase their earning capacity, they are better placed to support their families. But none of that focus is part of what that social investment approach from the national government has given us. When they amended here in the rewrite the principles of the social security legislation, I would have actually liked to have seen an amendment to the principles, but the amendment I would have liked to have seen to the principles would have been the inclusion of a principle that every person who goes to Work and Income New Zealand or requires assistance is given their full entitlements and given the absolute commitment that they are not being denied anything that them and their family may actually be eligible to access. I would have liked to have seen in the principles that something like that was put in there. I would have liked to have seen also that something about how people would be given full access to their rights in terms of how to make a complaint, because these are real issues. And actually, we saw it recently with the impact workshops that were undertaken by the AAAP, Auckland Action Against Poverty, alongside Work and Income New Zealand. I think they ran that workshop for 3 days. Something like 700 people went through those workshops, wanting to know whether or not they were accessing their full entitlements, wanting to know whether or not there was any other support they could access, and they were inundated. AAAP were inundated with requests for support, and that support should actually be being provided by the government agency that's been put in place to provide that support. We shouldn't need unfunded charitable organisations or voluntary organisations like AAAP to step in to make sure that people are getting their full entitlements. And actually, you know, it is mean of the government to constantly find ways of denying people access to things that they actually are entitled to. The stress and anxiety that it causes these people is huge. And I think all of us who are electorate MPs see this on a daily basis with the people that are coming through our offices. And I know, having had at last count 310 constituents come through my electorate office in Kelston over a period of a year, that it's a big issue for people out there. 63% of the 310 constituents that came through my office in a year had Work and Income New Zealand and, in many cases, housing as well as their primary issue for coming for support. So that's just one area. That's just at the principles that we have concerns about. But also there's a mismatch between the operation of the welfare system and the proposed principle of ensuring the best possible outcome for beneficiaries. So by writing that into the principles, but then on the other hand, the minister not committing the ministry to tracking employment outcomes, then how can they possibly say that the principle is to the best possible outcomes for the actual client? Because all we see on this side of the House is that government sees the desirable outcome only as going off benefit, not about going on to something better. So that's a concern. There are some changes in here that aren't about a rewrite. They are complete different policy areas, Mr. Speaker, including the shift from an emergency unemployment benefit to an exceptional circumstances benefit, because it's not just changing the title of that benefit's name, it's actually changing the expectations too, in terms of imposing work obligations onto those people who go to access that type of benefit. So that's not a straight switch of title. There are actually obligations that come with that change in name and with that new benefit. So, Mr. Speaker, we're really disappointed on this side of the House that this isn't the straightforward policy, neutral policy, social security legislation rewrite that we were promised. I'm disappointed, and I'm sure there's others in the House, that all we can see is another sneaky move by the national government to try and make changes under the guise of something that actually we had all supported on this side of the House, but now have to question, and we're questioning the motives of the Minister, the motives of the national government in terms of what they're proposing here. So, as I said from the get-go, we will support this only because we do support a rewrite of the legislation to bring it into line, to make it consistent, to make it transparent, to tidy it up. We will support it to select committee, Mr Speaker, but we will not support the national government's hidden agenda around this, and we will want the time necessary to make sure we can analyse this.
I'm sorry to interrupt the member, but her time has expired.
To the extent required.
The Honourable